Regular meeting of the Advisory Committee on Housing is beginning. I'll turn it over to Joey and Colleen.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. Yes, so today is Thursday, August 12th, and we will call this meeting to order. Katie, would you mind taking the roll, please?
Yes, I will do that. Karina Bowler.
Present.
Bruce Brunner.
Here.
Joey Dobson.
Here.
Colleen Evinger.
Here.
Chloe Jackson. Spolinski J. Cox.
Here.
Queen Kimmons. Charlotte Kinsley.
Here.
Liliana Latron Garcia.
Here.
David McGee. Lisa Mears. Melissa Newman. Colleen O'Connor Toberman.
Here.
Maggie Oddie.
Here.
Scott Schaefer.
Here.
Janine Sija.
Here.
Cecil Smith. Annie Wells.
Here.
Just gonna go back because I know some others joined. Chloe Jackson. Queen Kimmons. David McGee. Lisa Mears. Melissa Newman. Cecil Smith. Okay, there are 12 members present, so we have a quorum.
Great. So our next item is to adopt the agenda. We do have to make a slight amendment to the agenda because we will not have the we won't have the update of the Fair Housing Overview from the Civil Rights Department. We had some scheduling confusion or snafus, and so they're not able to make it today. So we'll need to eliminate that from the agenda for today. And then I just have to apologize in advance. I need to step away for a brief time, a little before 3:30 for about 15 minutes, and then I'll be back in. Joey will make sure to manage everything in the meantime. So do we need a motion on, we need a motion on adopting the revised agenda. So any motions to adopt our revised agenda?
Yeah, I'll move to adopt the agenda with that deletion.
I second.
Great, thanks. Katie, could you take the vote on this one too?
I will. Karina Bowler.
Aye.
Bruce Brunner.
Aye.
Joey Dobson.
Aye.
Colleen Evinger.
Aye.
Spolinski J. Cox.
Aye.
Charlotte Kinsley.
Aye.
Liliana Latron Garcia.
Aye.
Colleen O'Connor Toberman.
Aye.
Maggie Oddie.
Aye.
Scott Schaefer.
Aye.
Janine Sija.
Aye.
Annie Wells.
Aye.
12 ayes. So that's adopted.
Excellent. Then we're just moving right through. Then our last order of business is to accept the minutes from the last meeting. And do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
This is Charlotte. I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll second. This is Colleen O'Connor Toberman.
All right, I will take the roll. Karina Bowler.
Aye.
Bruce Brunner.
Aye.
Joey Dobson.
Aye.
Colleen Evinger.
Aye.
Spolinski J. Cox.
Aye.
Charlotte Kinsley.
Aye.
Liliana Latron Garcia.
Aye.
Colleen O'Connor Toberman.
Aye.
Maggie Oddie.
Aye.
Scott Schaefer.
Aye.
Janine Sija.
Aye.
Annie Wells.
Aye.
There are 12 Aye, so that the minutes are adopted.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. That was a fast order of business for a Zoom call or a Microsoft Teams call. Might be our record.
Yeah, all right. So moving right along, next on our agenda is our committee's public comment period. So as you know, we set aside about 10 minutes per meeting to hear any public comments from non-committee members. So we'd ask that anyone who's here to make a comment, keep your remarks to about 1 minute, and we ask that your comments be related to housing issues in the city of Minneapolis, and if possible, related to our agenda for the day. We take notes on all public comments and follow up as necessary and discuss them as they relate to our other agenda items. So if anyone is here, has called into the meeting today to make a public comment, now at this time, could you please unmute yourself by pressing *6 on your phone and state your name? We will then call on individuals to make your comment. So is anyone here to make a public comment? Again, *6 to unmute. I am not hearing anyone at this time. If anyone's trying to make a comment, again, you'll need to push *6 on your phone to unmute yourself. Is anyone here called into the meeting, excuse me, to make a public comment? Okay, I think hearing none, I think we will go ahead and close the public comment period. Yep, okay, I'm not seeing anyone. So now, I don't know, Colleen, if you want to introduce this, but we're going to move to Katie, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so the update is to talk about potentially returning in person and then the plans for that. So yeah, Katie, go ahead and you can give us our update.
Yes, so earlier this summer, the City Council, after the governor's emergency powers expired, the city did maintain some limited emergency authorization for the pandemic, which is why we are still meeting remotely right now. There was a resolution adopted July 1st that allowed boards and commissions to continue to meet remotely pending a transition plan. And at that time, the resumption of in-person meetings was supposed to happen no later than September 30th. So that means our August meeting is remote. Our September meeting can still be remote. But as of now, the plan was to move it to in-person meetings in October. That's also when the City Council committee meetings will begin meeting in person. One moment here, I have a, honey. Sorry about that. So that's a good segue into my next comment because I have a child home from daycare because of a positive COVID case at daycare. As we know, things are changing rapidly as we speak. So it is possible the mayor and council will make modifications to that resolution. But as of now, we will still meet remotely in September. And if that resolution does not change, we would return to an in-person meeting in October. But as we all know right now, everything is fairly in flux. So we will keep you posted, but you can plan for September that we will continue meeting remotely and we'll share another update at that time. So sorry about that interruption.
Katie, I think you scripted that. That was well timed. And you should let your kid know that I think we have vacancies on our committee, good perspective.
Lots of ideas.
It's like you've done this before. It was like so seamless and graceful. So well done.
Does anyone, before we move on, does anyone have any questions about that, about like where the city's at with emergency powers or for our committee's sake? I think we're all used to kind of being flexible and taking things day by day, but it's good to have that certainty that at least we will be remote through September. But if anyone has any questions about that now, before we move on. All right, great. So the next part of our agenda is there's quite a bit moving or has been moving with regard to housing policy and things, business that the city council has taken up related to COVID funding. So we're just going to go through some updates on some of the housing related topics we've discussed here as a committee in the recent months. Katie, are you going to kick this off?
Yes, I will start with the first two items on the list, and then Robin Garwood, who has joined us, is going to talk about the last two. The first one is the American Rescue Plan. At our last meeting, we had overview, I think it was our June meeting, an overview of all the housing and homelessness proposals. Those were adopted by the city council, and so city staff are now working on the implementation of those pieces. But that was just sort of the first tranche of the funding that the city had decided what would be happening with. There's going to be a community engagement process for the other funds, the other American Rescue Plan funds, over the next several months. So I don't have a lot of details to share on what that process is going to look like at this point, but there will be more to come, and we'll certainly keep the committee informed about what that will look like. Actually, Robin, I may put you on the spot on that one. Do you have anything to add in terms of the process for the rest of the American Rescue Plan funds from the council perspective?
No, not really. I mean, my understanding is that it's basically going to be rolled into the budget process for next year. So people will be able to give your opinions about how we should spend those dollars as part of the overall 2022 budget.
And on that note, the mayor's 2022 budget address is tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock. That is going to be streamed on the city's YouTube channel. So if you want to watch it, you can. And then the documents will come out shortly after that. So I know later in the agenda, we're going to talk about future meeting topics. So I think we'll talk about how this committee wants to respond to the budget. But if you are interested, you can watch the budget address tomorrow afternoon. So any questions about that before I move to the next item? Okay, so the next item is the opportunity to purchase policy. I believe I shared at our last meeting that the city has hired a consultant who is assisting with drafting ordinance language right now. I'm working with a city staff team to do that. So that is happening. That's an ongoing process. The language is based off of a staff direction that the council adopted earlier this year, which we've shared with this committee, which was based on the study that the consultant group did last year. So we're kind of building off of that last year's study and then the staff direction that the council adopted in the spring for the framework for the policy. So the ordinance is being drafted currently. We anticipate having a draft for consideration, obviously always subject to change based on how long things take and all sorts of things, but by the end of the year is the anticipated timeline right now. The consultant along with city staff will be doing stakeholder engagement with that draft once there's a draft ready to share, and certainly intend to bring that forward to this committee. So that would likely happen this fall if everything stays on track. That the draft language would be presented to the Housing Advisory Committee. So that's where that stands.
And Katie, do you have any knowledge of any of the specific plans as it's being drafted? Any specific terms?
In terms of like the details of the ordinance?
Yeah.
No, not yet. At this point, I don't have anything beyond like that. It's based off the staff direction that the council adopted earlier this year.
But maybe Robin, you can speak to this a little bit. I mean, the staff direction did spell out some of the specific terms. Like it wasn't just draft one that comports with the study from last year. Like it has some specific elements. I don't know if Robin, you want to hit the high notes of real quick, or someone? Because there are some like elements, I guess.
I can pull it up too.
Yeah, I was just looking for the actual link to it. I'll find the link to it and put it in the chat. Because it's very specific.
My question would be, like, when we saw that study, it gave 3 different alternative pathways, right? And so I'm assuming as we've begun to move forward, staff has chosen a pathway to pursue of those 3.
The council actually directed staff to move forward with a framework, essentially.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yes, and I would say it's most closely based on the option 2 from that study, which was giving renters the opportunity to purchase, but then also having a qualified organization have a right to purchase as well. So it's not exactly option 2 from that study, but that's what it was closest to, the council direction. And
so I did just drop that into the chat too, for those who haven't got a chance to see it.
And we can maybe add that, we'll make sure that the link to this is in the notes for this meeting too, for anybody who cannot access the meeting chat, so that we can make that publicly available that way too. But it is on the city's LIMS website. So those are the updates I had. So if there aren't additional questions on that, Robin is going to update on the SRO ordinance and the rent stabilization charter amendments.
Sure. So the big update on the SRO ordinance is that it passed the council unanimously last month. I have just dropped the ordinance into chat. The high level, we are reallowing single room occupancy and rooming houses in Minneapolis. They will have to be, for now at least, a nonprofit or a government provider. That's one of the things that I know there was some amount of pushback from various folks about, but the council decided to keep that as one of the limitations. Again, I have been viewing this, and I think Cam has as well, as being similar to the way that we got into accessory dwelling units, where we kind of move in a little bit gradually and cautiously just to make sure that it goes okay, and then open it up more over time. But yes, does anybody have any questions about the ordinance as it passed, or comments or anything?
I might just add that one of the, just a reminder that one of the American Rescue Plan funding items that was already adopted was $5 million for SRO development, acquisition, and rehab to create SROs. So that is one of the things, when I mentioned that staff are working on figuring out how to implement, that is one of the pieces. We're going to be working pretty closely with Hennepin County. They've already acquired a couple of hotels that they intend to convert to SROs, and they're considering some additional funding as well. So so we're excited that, the policy adopted, and we also have funding available to make this happen relatively quickly in our community.
I just really want to thank the committee for having taken the time, especially Scott and I suppose she's
Brenda.
Brenda's no longer here. Just for taking the time to be part of the conversation about that. I recognize that you might not have gotten everything you wanted out of it, but I think it definitely made the policy stronger to have you involved. So really appreciate it.
I just have one question or comment, and that is, I know there's some money available, but typically nonprofits, if they're going to be doing the development, take about twice as long as a market rate developer or builder to put a deal together because of the amount of time it takes to get financing. So, my only concern is nonprofits and government agencies only represent 1% of the rental property or the units that are available for rent. And by limiting it to that, we're going to have a very, very small subset of information to draw from. And I think the direction, the thought process that it's mainly going to be geared toward homeless relief or some of these other things, I think we're limiting our thinking, because I think you're going to start to see quite a bit more workforce type, which is much more market rate type of things available that people are interested in. And so I think there's going to be this propensity for non-government or non-nonprofits to be interested in engaging in this process. So I think it'll be small to begin with, as you mentioned, but that's why we have regulatory. So I'm just going to encourage that we look at it in a way that the scope might be much bigger than you think. And there's a couple SROs that are out there in Minneapolis and St. Paul that are doing a very good job, and they're run by nonprofits. But I talked to one of them, and they said, they're having, a fair amount of, as an example, Somali Americans who live in them because they're sending money home, and they're looking for, they're single men who are, they're working hard so they can bring their families. And that's a part that maybe the nonprofit and government piece isn't going to touch. So I think there's going to be good availability for this category. And I'm really encouraged that it's being opened up, at least initially. So thank you.
So Bruce, just a couple of things about that. I think you're right that we should not just think of this as being a way for folks to get out of homelessness or to becoming homeless in the first place. I think it's much bigger than that. I mean, that's definitely one of the motivators.
Yeah.
But we should, you're absolutely right, be thinking about this as a way for people who just want to live in that kind of a place to have access to it.
Yeah.
And so I completely agree with that. The other piece, everything that I have heard so far about someone other than a nonprofit or a government entity opening up an SRO has been hypothetical.
Yeah.
So it'll be really interesting to see if folks come forward who actually want to do this as a sort of someone from outside that sort of walled garden, if you want to think of it that way.
Yep.
That actually really helps, I think, clarify everybody's thinking and make it much more specific. Like, okay, so then what would that look like when we've got a real concrete project?
Yep.
So I hope that we do have folks who approach us with that idea, because I think there is the willingness to treat this as just a first step, and then think about broadening it out further.
Yeah. Yep.
And Scott, do you want to go ahead? You got your hand up. We'll go to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Robin. I was happy to provide my thoughts on this and support the policy change. I think it's great. I was one of those voices that was hoping to see it go a little farther, but I do remember, when the accessory dwelling unit ordinance was passed, and at first it was only for owner-occupied homes, and then that was relaxed. And so I guess if my only question would be, is there any idea of when we could reevaluate this and see if we could move it farther? Because I am thinking about, it's not just, Minneapolis needs to open the gates. Like, lenders might need to see this concept proven in the market, and there's just a lot of steps and a lot of need in this area. And so, I guess when would you take a look at this and see if we can tweak it to allow more SROs into the city?
I think that next year would not be too soon. If we could look at it then. I guess I'll just reiterate, I think that it would be, I think that the impetus is probably going to have to come from someone who actually wants to do a project, who is not a nonprofit. As a concrete example, they can bring forward and say, hey, I want to do this, and your rules are making it so I can't do this. And that's, to be honest, what it took for ADUs. It took folks like Bruce saying, I would build more ADUs if you would let me do that. And here's where I want to put them, and here's what they would look like, and they're a good thing. And then instead of it being, I mean, there's a reason that they don't show you the monster in most monster movies until maybe the end of the movie. You know, it's easier to be scared of something that isn't like right in front of you and specific. And so I think once we have that, everybody will think, oh, okay, so that doesn't seem so bad. Let's give that a try. So I think that's the big next thing that we need is some interested and motivated developer or set of developers to come forward and say, let me in too.
Thanks.
Any other final questions on single room occupancy? Then I think the other update was on rent stabilization amendments,
Yeah.
right?
Rent
Thanks.
stabilization. So the council voted last week to put 2 different questions forward for the ballot this fall to change the charter. The first empowers the people of Minneapolis to collect signatures to put forward a question on rent stabilization on a future ballot. The second empowers the city council to pass a rent stabilization law or to put that law on a future ballot. The mayor has vetoed the first of those pathways, and the council will be considering overriding that veto at its sort of special meeting tomorrow. We'll see if there are the votes for that. It takes 9 votes of the council to override a mayoral veto. Regardless of what happens with that pathway, the other pathway, the one that empowers the council to act, has moved forward and will be on the ballot this fall. If it is adopted, and adoption takes 51% of the vote, that will then tee up the possibility of the council next year taking up a rent stabilization law, and there will be a lot of different questions about, you know, the specifics of that law. There will also be some question as to the right process, because this, as I said, the charter amendment will allow the council to adopt it just as a law. This is a state law that we're trying to comply with that no one has ever actually like tested. So it will be interesting to see what happens with it. We don't really have a roadmap to follow because it's just not been used. So that's what's happening with rent stabilization. I do hope that folks also had a chance to see the Cura report. I think we've talked about it in the past, but okay, good. And I'll find the rent stabilization charter amendment stuff and drop it in the chat as well.
Yeah, we did have Professor Ed Getz at one of our meetings earlier this year to present on that report.
Yeah, thanks, Robin, for that update. Because we didn't, these votes have, taken place, of course, since we as a committee have had a chance to meet, since we didn't meet in July, and then some of these votes just happened in the last week or two. So I guess I was just I think because we have a little bit of time opened up on our agenda, and because we have sort of this unexpected timing where there is this vote tomorrow on considering whether the council members want to override the mayor's veto of that one path. I was thinking maybe we could discuss just a little bit as a committee if there's interest in this committee in taking a position. So I guess, not a particularly formal motion, but I would just kind of put a motion on the table for general discussion, suggesting that our committee recommend to the city council to approve both versions or both charter amendments, both pathways. And just briefly, I mean, Robin explained this, but I think it's just really important to remember that these amendments are about keeping the door open to these different ways of, in the future, potentially adopting a rent control or rent stabilization policy. Both of these amendments are just giving the council permission to consider a policy, or giving, you know, keeping the door open for a citizen initiative to maybe be on the ballot. The actual policy would be debated and crafted in the future and may or may not actually happen. It's a matter of keeping the doors open. So I think it makes sense for the city, especially because it is the first time we're really digging into this, to kind of keep these doors open as long as possible and explore what is the right way to do this if we are going to do it at all. And a couple of just other things I would just point out, you know, we've seen a commitment to renters' rights, and I think that's just more crucial now than ever, as we're seeing with the eviction moratorium off-ramp, which we'll discuss a little bit more later in this meeting. We're seeing so clearly right now the ways that people are pinched financially, and I think the timing with some of the protections of the off-ramp will be ending by next summer, that getting this rolling in whatever way makes sense for a city is just really crucial. And the thing that I remember standing out to me just so starkly when we got that presentation on the Cura report was just such the different experience that white renters in our city are having than BIPOC renters. And because you saw, you know, rents were staying relatively stable for white renters, but it's specifically people with low incomes and people of color who have traditionally experienced these more exorbitant hikes on an annual or even more frequent basis. So again, it's not about the policy and why the policy matters for this vote tomorrow. It's about procedurally, you know, keeping these options open. So those are just some of the reasons why I would suggest that as a committee, we take a position encouraging the council tomorrow to essentially override the mayor's veto of the citizen initiative version of the citizen initiative amendment and urge them to support it. So I think open for discussion. I think we have some time, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Thanks, Joey. I'll just add that I agree completely with that, and I would support this committee moving forward with a statement of support on that.
Robin, can you explain the additional pieces that the community-led proposal has versus the more generic one for the city council? Because I also kind of am familiar with what St. Paul is putting, where they have some hard and fast pieces that tend to not be non-negotiable then if it passes.
Yeah, so I am not aware of specific language that is like a consensus among all of the groups who might work to pass something. I do think that there is, you know, some general consensus on some things, like, you know, not having decontrol at vacancy and various details like that. But the really, I think Joey put it well. It's not so much right now about the policy specifics. It's about having different pathways. And I'll just say, like we saw this with the minimum wage. Had we had the capacity for the people to directly bring something forward without it having to pass the council, the policy might have looked different. It might have been stronger. And so I think it is a thing that gives folks some leverage. It also, you know, if we ended up with a council that that just didn't want to do rent stabilization, it would give people the capacity to sort of get around a more recalcitrant council. I think this council would absolutely act on it, but you know, we have this election coming up in the fall, and nobody knows exactly what's going to happen, and things could change. So I support it for that reason. That it's good to have more options on the table. We also kind of just, when I say we, Cam and I just like direct democracy, just think it's kind of good. And so the empowering people to bring ideas forward, and that's, you know, that's a thing where we disagree with the mayor, and I think honestly and legitimately, you know, I mean, he doesn't really like that, doesn't think it produces good policy, and we kind of think it does. And I think there are anything that the hardest core advocates and organizers want to bring forward is going to have to pass at the ballot box and be supported by everybody. And so that's the thing that would put some maybe constraint on exactly how, I don't know, how firm they want to be on everything. They have to count 50% plus one votes. So that's why we supported that. That's why we brought it forward. That's why Cam will be voting to override the veto.
So let me ask one specific question because you brought it up. So in the community-led or the organizer-led one, is there the no decontrol between tenants? Is that in the proposal?
So again, there isn't really a proposal yet. There's something that Minneapolis United for Rent Control has put out as a, I don't know, conversation starter.
Okay.
But it's not actually a written thing. I would expect that they would put something forward that looks pretty much like what they're putting forward in St. Paul this year.
Is that what we would vote on though?
No.
Okay.
No,
so that's more my question.
That's in the future. So if this passes this year, if both of these pathways pass, then any specific policy is either A, going to have to pass the city council, or B, have to pass at the ballot in 2022 or 2023 or 4. So none of the details of the specific policies are going to be on this year's ballot.
I understand. That was my main question. So.
Folks, feel free to just jump in or use the raise hand function. I'm not seeing any teams, little yellow hands raised, but feel free to just jump in here and have discussion.
It's a smaller forum, right? So it's a little easier to get the mic. Yeah, I would just agree on general principle. Why close doors unnecessarily? You know, why limit the options at this stage in the game when you know, as was stated, there isn't even a specific proposal on the table. So I'd be in favor of letting council know that we as a group support the notion of having both pathways available.
Other thoughts or questions about this one?
So I know Scott stepped away for a moment, and I don't know if Colleen is back. I think if you are planning to take a vote, we might have to. This is where I need more expertise than I have on the rules, but I think we might need to wait until they're back to actually take the vote. If that is your intention as the committee to take a vote on this.
For quorum purposes or because they're, yeah. I mean, I think that's just the respectful thing to do regardless of rules since they were just stepped away briefly.
Since we are waiting, I'll just share that I'm not an advocate for pushing both forward. I like the idea of the city council having the ability, because there's quite a bit of nuance to these types of things. And as we've already found for city charter types of things, the verbiage is very difficult to understand. And in the cases of what's going to be coming forward, like on the strong mayor thing, it's very confusing for people that really don't delve into it. And I'll just use the example, like having that the decontrol piece. I own properties, and I went back and looked at my 10 or 12 year average of rent increases, and on average they're 1.8%, which came very close to the Cura study. Over a 20-year period, they average 1.8%. But what I try to do is not raise them while renters are in place. So I do the rent raises in between tenants. So if there was no decontrol, I'd be forced to raise rent every year to current people, which I hesitate from doing because I'd be precluded from raising in between. So people would get $30 or $40, a year, or $50 a year raises instead of like $100 in between the 2 or 3 year period. So that's just one of the things I think City Council they understand more the nuance where voters don't understand that nuance. So, I don't want to be forced into a place where I have to raise every year because I need to average about 1.8% to stay even. So I just thought I would share that.
I think that's why the advocacy and education piece is so important, because I do think voters and renters are able to understand legislation that directly affects their daily lives and should be able to have a voice on that. And again, the nuances of the policy is not actually what is at play with this vote tomorrow. It's keeping the pathways open to have multiple options to move forward. So I do support moving forward with both of those options because I think renters should have the right to have a direct voice in this, and I trust their ability to be able to weigh in on that.
Other thoughts, questions on this one?
Hey, this is Karina. I don't have a question, but I had to step away. I have some construction going on in my house. So I meet what you guys are doing.
Sure. Did you hear the update about the rent stabilization, the rent control amendments?
No, something emergency happened and Excel Energy was in my house. So
sure. So real quick overview. So there's 2 ballot initiatives that the city council has put forward to put on the ballot this year. One would allow the city council to consider a rent control ordinance in the future. The other one would allow like a voter initiative to have voters come up with, or to have citizens, residents come up with a rent control policy that would go on potentially a ballot in the future. Both of them are just allowing either of those things to happen in the future. So the city council has supported both of those. The mayor vetoed the option of putting on the ballot the option of allowing voters to put a rent control policy on the ballot in the future. And tomorrow, the city council is considering whether or not they want to vote, or they will vote to override that veto and still move forward with both rent control pathways.
right.
So we're considering as a committee if we want to tell the council, we want you to support both of these pathways tomorrow.
Yeah, we definitely know that it's so needed with these rents in Minneapolis so high, and people paycheck not matching the so rent stabilization is, it's definitely. Yeah, so thanks for that update.
And for those who might not be looking, Robin just put in the chat the letter that the mayor drafted, the veto letter explaining his veto, so that you can kind of, if you want to take some time to get that perspective as well. Robin just put that in the chat. Liliana?
Yes, I have a question. So if there's 2 pathways, there's only way to choose one or the other. It could not be a hybrid or a combination of both to make the best decision for everyone involved.
Maybe I'll take that. So if both of the pathways are put on the ballot this fall, and if both of them pass, I would say there absolutely could be a hybrid that folks follow in terms of the procedure next year. So just like to game it out a little bit, one of the things that could happen is organizers could start gathering signatures pretty quickly in 2022 for the sort of firmest version of the policy that they that would then give them some leverage to pass a policy that might be stronger than what the council would do just on its own. And the organizers could then make a decision at whatever point, before July or August, when they would have to submit everything and actually start the process to formally put something on the ballot, to say, okay, you've now passed a rent stabilization law that is strong enough for us to support it. So we'll feel free to now pull back our signatures, and we won't go forward and put our thing. So I think that there are a number of different ways that the two pathways can kind of converge or impact each other. And I think that's kind of a healthy tension and like a set of checks and balances. So yeah, I think if they both get onto the ballot and they both pass, there's a lot of additional ways that it could that it could go.
Thank you.
Well, maybe I'm not seeing Scott or Colleen right now, so maybe it makes sense to move on to other parts of our agenda for now, with the plan that we'll circle back to this to take a vote and answer any final questions later in our meeting. Does that plan sound generally okay? Like, it makes sense? Charlotte, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually have a question. In the other states that have passed a rent stabilization policy, did they also have state laws that they were navigating around, and which pathway ended up working for those states? Robin, do you know?
So at the state level, so there isn't any federal preemption of rent stabilization that I'm aware of. So at the state level, Oregon and California were able to just sort of do what they wanted to do. I'm not aware of another state that has this, frankly, kind of strange half or partial preemption of rent stabilization that Minnesota has. There are other states that have a full preemption that say no city in our state can ever adopt any kind of rent stabilization or rent control law. Then there are other states that don't have that kind of preemption. Minnesota, I think, is a little bit weird in having one that says you can't unless you put it on the ballot and people vote for it. And so that's the thing that we're navigating is the existence of that state law and the fact that it requires us to have the authorization of the people in some way on the whole concept of rent stabilization. And that's so to your point, because no city in Minnesota has dealt with this, has actually moved forward with this yet, and because no other cities in other states have had to, because no other states that I'm aware of have the same kind of like partial preemption, there isn't really much of a roadmap. It will be helpful to us if St. Paul passes their ballot initiative this year. I would expect that would be challenged, and so they'll be a little bit ahead of us in terms of having some sort of court weigh in on exactly what the law means. The law is also, just for what it's worth, pretty ambiguously worded. So it's, I think it's going to take potentially some litigation to figure out like how it is really supposed to work. So I guess the short answer to your question is no, there isn't really anybody else that we can look to for guidance on this.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Right, I see Colleen, you're typing in the chat. I don't know if that means you can't talk right now, but if you're back, if you want to let us know. Maybe not. I just saw she was typing there for a second, so I wasn't sure. Katie, what do you think we should do?
Yeah, I think maybe we should table it and come back when we can take the vote. And maybe in the meantime, I can try to confirm the rules. Like if we had a quorum at the beginning, can we take the vote if we don't have one right now? So.
Okay.
For what it's worth, that is standard Robert's rules, that you have a quorum until someone asks if you have a quorum.
Ah, well, Robin. So I suppose
let's move forward and circle back. I think that's the right thing to do. Scott, and all right, let's move on. All right, so the next thing that we just wanted to give some space on the agenda for today was the eviction moratorium off-ramp legislation. It might kind of seem like old news by now, but it didn't exist when we all met the last time in early June. So we were thinking we would just kind of overview kind of the stages of the off-ramp and the protections and rules of the legislation, and then just have some time for people to share either what you're seeing and experiencing on the ground or to ask questions about it as you might be interacting with it in your professional or personal capacities. It's of course something that we at Legal Aid have been, not only advocating, we're in the advocacy space as the legislation was being created, but then now are dealing with it in the Zoom courtroom every day. So I've been in court, several times in the last couple of months doing, representing clients in the midst of these new laws. So happy to have some time for discussion of what people are experiencing, what questions people have. There's obviously also the Rent Help Minnesota program, which is more of a state thing, but there's some interrelated pieces of the moratorium. So Katie, did you want to share just the Minnesota Housing has kind of an overview of the timeline that we were just going to put up on the screen as we talk through it. So many of you have maybe seen this image floating around, but the off-ramp, as they're calling it, began on June 30th. But really fast forwarding to what's relevant now, at this point in time, starting July 14th, landlords could file evictions for breach of lease for the first time. So for material breaches of lease, and we've seen there's a lot of these cases in Hennepin County. So we practice in the 4th District, the Hennepin County Courthouse, and there are 2 to 4 kind of group calendars every week at the courthouse that have anywhere, right now they have like 12 to 20 cases on every calendar right now. So we are, we're seeing 50 to 100 eviction cases, probably not quite 100, but right now we're seeing a lot of evictions, mostly for breach of lease. So landlords right now can file an eviction case for a material breach of lease, or they could file the other things that they could file for are if they allege that the tenant is eligible for rental assistance, COVID rental assistance, but the tenant is refusing to apply or comply with that program. Or if there's kind of exceptional situations like criminal activity that the landlord's alleging that the person is a danger to the community, that kind of thing. So that's where we're at now, and we are seeing those cases. We're seeing a lot of breach of lease cases in court that the landlord is alleging a breach of lease. And when you talk, you're in settlement negotiations kind of behind the scenes of, rent also hasn't been paid. And so they're also really concerned about rent. So we're working on navigating those cases and representing folks, through trial if needed in the breach of lease trial, but also trying to just resolve the situation, help get the renter applied, get their application in for rental assistance if that's truly what the landlord is most concerned about. So anyway, that's the period that we're in right now. Starting tomorrow, a lease could be terminated. So this isn't an eviction filing, but starting tomorrow, landlords are allowed to give notice that a lease will be terminated if a person if their tenant is not eligible for COVID rental assistance. And then 1 month later, September 12th, is when landlords can begin to file non-payment of rent cases if the tenant is not eligible for rent help, for COVID-based rental assistance. For all non-payment of rent cases through October 12th, the landlord needs to give a 15-day pre-eviction filing notice. So it's something that is not required generally by state law, but for non-payment of rent cases is required through October 12th. With a little asterisk here that, we as a committee considered and the city of Minneapolis approved back in late May. For cases in the city of Minneapolis, the city adopted a permanent policy that landlords need to give a 14-day notice to a tenant before filing a non-payment of rent case in court. So just a reminder that that is permanent policy in the city of Minneapolis right now. But then on October 12th, these protections end. So starting October 12th, a landlord could file a non-payment of rent case as usual if rent is behind, with the big exception that if the tenant has a pending application through Rent Help Minnesota or COVID-based rent assistance program, that non-payment case cannot move forward while that rent application is pending. So if the landlord knows there's a case, they have an application pending, they shouldn't be filing a non-payment case. And if the tenant applies in the meantime, those cases should be put on pause. And that protection goes through June 1st of 2022, next year. So that's kind of a quick overview of the off-ramp legislation. I'm sure this is not news to many of you, but we just thought we wanted to give some space for discussion on it right now. And I'm just looking to see, yeah, so like I said, we're representing as many people. For now, MMLA Legal Aid has had the capacity at Hennepin to represent all the tenants who come to court who say they want a lawyer. As cases increase, that, I don't know how long that will be the case. But so far, just a reminder, we are seeing folks in court, and especially if there's a dispute about rent, the best advice for anybody is apply for rent help or COVID-based rent assistance. So yeah, just wanted to open it up. People have questions about the policy, about what's happening on the ground, or want to share what they're seeing in their spheres of the world. Liliana, I think I saw your hand up first.
Yes, I have a question. Out of the 50, 100 cases that you are, reviewing or representing tenants, how many of those are for people that are either afraid to apply, or they just don't know how to do the process, or they're just in denial? Would you say?
Good question. So most of the cases are on paper. What the landlord filed the case about was an alleged breach of the lease, because that's the main kind of case that can be filed right now. And then and a case that's just about breach of lease can move forward if the landlord proves that the tenant has breached the lease. It doesn't matter then if they have a rent help application pending. The landlord can move forward with a breach of lease case if they prove, the tenant has an unauthorized person living there, or whatever the breach might be. But I will say, on the ground, we are seeing unfortunately, a lot of people still don't know about this program, or have struggled to effectively apply. They aren't really sure. I called, someone helped. I don't know if I have a pending application. One of the challenges, I think, with the Rent Help Minnesota program has been communication between the program and the applicant, and easy access for the applicant to know. And then, of course, all the barriers that a person might be experiencing, whether it's access to internet or a device that makes it easy to get that update. So I would say it's a mix, but we are seeing, people are being evicted right now for breach of lease. And then Charlotte, I see you too.
Yeah, thank you. I was curious. So one of the things that we saw over the summer, we ran a hotline just while social workers were out of their buildings. We ran a hotline just to kind of help people navigate both our internal resources and external resources. And by far the most common sort of outcome of the calls was from folks who had applied for rent help, but hadn't heard anything back and were just kind of looking for support or some confirmation. And we also found that they often didn't know they were protected from evictions with that, having had done that. And so my question, and Joey, maybe you can answer this, is, so if somebody were to have applied and the landlord moves forward with an eviction, or thought they applied, so I guess both scenarios. So say they actually have applied, when does it get caught that they've actually applied and that this isn't and will that always get caught? And what if they thought they had applied, but maybe they were missing some paperwork? Just kind of wondering about those two scenarios and how people will, I guess, how that will get captured legally through the process.
It's a great question, and is something that we're working on internally a lot, because there's not great access to the system to see, and even the field partners, the folks that have received funds to be, to really directly help folks apply, they don't even have kind of special access to go behind the scenes if they don't have the tenant's exact login information, which is frustrating. But so what we're doing at court, we're there at court when the case is virtually at court right now. And if that were to happen, especially if the case was filed for non-payment of rent, which we are not able to see, we're not seeing those cases quite yet. But once we do, we will be in that moment helping that tenant figure that out. So if they have their login information, we can help them get in, or we will contact Minnesota Housing or, whichever program it is. We're also working on some additional capacity to maybe get some additional folks at court to help people get applications in if they haven't applied or didn't know about it. From my perspective, it's helpful that the legislation says the case also may not proceed. So it's not like the case has been filed and then you've lost your chance. The case has been filed, and at that first court appearance, we meet with that tenant and we help them get an application in. It should be treated like a pause button on that case until that application has worked its way through. And yeah, that's my experience too, talking with tenants, is that it's months, several months, multiple months before they're hearing anything right now. But yes, that's a challenge and something that we're working on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can
Bruce?
we
Oh yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Could we provide our rapid response hotline to you? So in case that somebody's in court and want to apply right away, you can say call now, and we have from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday, we have housing counselors that can help them. So is that a possibility? So we can immediately provide the assistance that people need?
That would be amazing. Yes. The more capacity for folks to help with that kind of quickly, the better. So if you want to email me or put it in the chat, whatever's convenient, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the other thing that I would just like to underscore on this is just a reminder that there is tons and tons of money, and more money than we need. And obviously there have been problems getting the money out in time, but I would underscore Joey's comment to just anyone try to spread the word that there's money available. People should apply. If in doubt, apply. And there are two different paths. One is for the tenant to initiate the application through Rent Help MN, and the other is for the landlord to initiate the application and submit a lot of the documentation like leases and such, and that's Zero Balance Project. So either one works.
Bruce, your hand's up. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. Is there a limit to how many times they can apply and receive aid?
So there's a limit of 15 months currently. I think that's maybe getting extended to 18 months. Colleen, you might have more specifics on that, but a total of 15 months. That's one of the challenges that's a little hard, is maybe somebody applied in May because they knew they were behind on March, April, and May rent, let's say, and now it's August and they haven't heard anything, or maybe they got their check and now they're behind again. They can reapply after a period of time. I think it's 30 days before you can reapply. But I do know there's a cap currently of 15 months of total coverage. But something else that people should know is if you have back rent that you're applying for, because you know I'm behind now maybe for July and August rent, you can also apply for up to 3 months of prospective rent. So I could apply for July and August and September, October, November, which I think is a really good idea for people to be doing, because especially through Rent Help Minnesota, because of the time that we know that it's taking for those applications to get processed. But people can also amend their application. It's not exactly a smooth process to do so, but it is possible to amend your application if you haven't heard and now you need to make an amendment about how much you owe. I don't know if I don't think there's a preclusion of like, wait, because you might only get 2 months, but if you wait several months, then you can apply for more. I don't believe that there's a restriction on that, but Colleen, you might have something to add on that too. And Katie looks like too.
Go ahead, Colleen, if you had an answer to that.
I missed the last part of what you were saying, Joey. If there's a restriction on
the number of times.
So you can apply multiple times. I mean, I think it's really about the total month cap. Right. So if you have already submitted one, got paid, you could submit again.
Right.
But it just, and at least in Zero Bounds project, there's some of the documentation would already be there. So it is conceivably easier. I don't know enough. I've not been into the insides of Rent Help MN to know how that works, but like the lease and such would be there. Obviously, you'd have to show again the ledger being behind, but yes, you could apply multiple times. So don't like save it up and I'm trying to get as far behind as I can before applying, like do it now and you can get it more.
Yeah, I've helped one of my tenants get 2 checks so far, and literally I do about 80% of the work because they're just very confused by the process. But they did one on their own and they got it, but it was for a month. But they're already behind again. And I was like, well, you can apply for 3 months out because she lost her job, right? So and I'm actually teaching landlords that they can do this to help not only get their money but help their people that are housed, right? So it's I think emphasizing that you can get 3 months out in advance as well is really, really strategic to keep people in their housing.
Yeah,
I agree. And another piece that I would just add is that we talk with the landlords that we're meeting with at court on behalf of our clients. It is a requirement for at least. It's for sure a stringent requirement for Rent Help Minnesota that once the tenant has moved, Rent Help is not going to pay that former landlord. So that's something that we talk about in eviction court, right? Is you can move forward with this eviction, but then you're saying goodbye to your chance to get the rent assistance. So they will only pay if the tenant is at the time they're cutting the check, or at that time, the person is still living in that property. Now, there's been advocacy kind of on both sides because the program is meant to be about housing stability, which is why Rent Help has made that decision. On the other hand, there are advocates who say it is helpful for a tenant who's looking for new housing to have that back rent paid so that it's not haunting them in future. But as it stands right now, Rent Help Minnesota will not pay a former tenancy once the tenant has moved out.
So Joey, the thing I was also going to add before is that the city and Hennepin County are working together to try to figure out strategies for reaching people at housing court, but also who may have a filing but haven't had their first hearing yet. So Hennepin County does have access to that data and has staffing through the Tenant Resource Center to be able to make phone calls to people who are getting eviction notices to try to help them complete applications. So they have some staffing right now to be able to do that, but we're in conversations to try to figure out how to increase that capacity to reach people and make them aware of how to file. Hennepin County and the city also did hire several nonprofit organizations to be field navigators for COVID emergency rental assistance. So those organizations will also be helping people the resource coordinators who are stationed at housing court can also filter information to those navigators to help people get applications completed more quickly. So we're sort of in the process of getting some of those systems up and running right now. But hopefully, you know, I know certainly people are facing eviction already, but hopefully there'll be more capacity to help people complete applications by October, when there's likely to be even greater number of people facing eviction.
Go ahead, Charlotte.
So if we are working with folks who have applied but just don't know like where they're at, and or have like their landlord is saying that they're going to get evicted, where is the best place? Like, is the tenant resource center the best place to send people where if we just really aren't sure and the tenant isn't sure, or are those field navigators better? It was a little tricky for us to know where to send people, and want to do it as directly as possible so they don't get the runaround. But I'm just not sure what the best spot is. Any thoughts?
That's a good question. I mean, I think if it's rent help, 211 is the place to send people to get the latest information, because 211 should be able to look up someone's application status, and then the person doesn't have to know whether it's the city's funding or the state's funding. Like, it's all in that system. So I think 211 is the best place. If the question really is like, do I have a submitted application, it's 211. If the question is, and Joey, feel free to add more to this if you disagree, but if the question is, I have an eviction notice and I need help responding to that, then it's legal aid or Homeline probably. But if it's just simply, I don't know what the status of my application is in rent help, then it's 211. If it's for Colleen for a zero balance project, it would be the Housing Link call center.
Yeah,
right?
Housing Link number, which is on the webpage. I'll put that into the chat here too. And I saw, Liliana, you had a question, or maybe it was a question or comment. You were saying Spanish and English, bilingual. Maybe that was for your services. I know Rent MN has different languages. I don't, again, know the details as well, but yeah, for Zero Balance Project, we have Katie's at 5 or 6 languages, and that's you can call and get someone on the phone in your choice. So I'll put this link in here. It includes a phone number, and people are, by and large, you will get someone to answer the phone immediately, and if not, they call back within an hour at most. It's not like be on hold for 2 hours or call back in 5 days kind of thing.
And if they need help navigating actually applying, it's 211. For
yeah, if they call 211 and they identify that they need help, 211 should be connecting them with a field partner based on their language needs, or like they'll connect them with the field partner based on their needs. You know, there's several community groups, Housing Justice Center, other groups are these field partners that what they're doing is, and I think Clues is one of them. So they will, but you need to, there's not like some list of field navigators and you pick one and go straight to the field navigator. Unfortunately, I mean, I see Liliana has her information about, help here, but in the general advice is call 211, say you want to apply and you want help applying. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. And the same if you're for the Zero Balance Project portion, obviously the landlord initiates it and gets like the property information and the lease and the back rent due, and then it goes to the tenant who then has to provide their information. And similarly, if for that portion of the renter completing their part of the application, they can also call in to in this case, it'd be the Housing Link number for questions on how to complete that application or their portion of it. Charlotte, what kinds of questions are you getting? You mentioned this, like, you had a question about how would someone know if they're being evicted and if there's a pending application? Are you getting those kinds of questions, or what are the biggest questions that people are coming to you with?
by far the biggest is just, I applied, but I've heard nothing, so I just don't know.
Yeah.
Like I would say probably half of our calls are in that, and we had 330 calls come in.
Yeah.
So.
It's hard to have no information. All right, well, thanks for doing this, Joey. Does anyone have questions on any of it? Super helpful. Thanks a lot, Joey.
Yeah, and obviously, like if people have legal questions or wondering if someone might benefit from talking to someone at Legal Aid, like please feel free to just reach out to me directly. In addition to, of course, you know, having them go through our intake process. But if quick questions, I'm super happy to be available for questions or making those a warmer handoff through our intake system at any time. Colleen, while you were gone, we talked a little bit, there was some more discussion about the rent stabilization charter amendments. I'm not sure when you, I don't remember when you exactly walked away, but this committee is considering making a recommendation to City Council to vote in favor of both charter amendments tomorrow. So we had some discussion about that, and that seemed to come to sort of a natural end, but we waited on voting on that recommendation because you and Scott were both away. So I don't know if Scott, you're back now, or if you want to revisit that.
So we are not taking a position on anything prior to there being some policy, because I think there's a lot, I mean, there's a lot of complexity to it, and there's a lot of potential unintended consequences, and I think the policy itself matters a lot. So I won't be able to vote on any, I'd have to abstain if we could vote.
Okay. Katie, do you think we should go back to that?
Yeah, it looks like Scott is back as well. So I don't know if you made a formal motion, but
yeah, maybe at this time I'll just renew my motion to have this committee make just a simple recommendation to the City Council to vote in favor of moving forward with both of the rent stabilization charter amendments that were discussed. Yeah, so if there's any final discussion, otherwise we can, if there's a second, then we can move forward to a vote. Any discussion? Final discussion on that? All right, then maybe we'll just see if there's a second, and if so, we can move forward with a vote.
I'll second.
all right, I will take the roll, and I am going to read most names again because I know a couple people joined by phone, so I'm not sure if they're committee members or not. So I will take the roll. Karina Bowler.
Aye.
Bruce Brunner.
No.
Joey Dobson.
Aye.
Dean Evinger.
Abstain.
Chloe Jackson. Chloe join. Spolinski J. Cox.
Aye.
Queen Kimmons. Charlotte Kinsley.
Aye.
Liliana Latron Garcia.
Aye.
David McGee. Lisa Mears. Melissa Newman. Colleen O'Connor Toberman.
Aye.
Maggie Oddie.
Aye.
Scott Schaefer.
Aye.
Janine Seja.
Aye.
Cecil Smith. Annie Wells.
Aye.
Okay, there are 10 ayes, 1 no, and 1 abstention.
Okay, great. So my plan will just be to pass that very simple statement along with the votes, with the vote numbers to City Council in advance of their meeting tomorrow morning. All right, thanks everyone. Now I think we'll move to our final thing, right?
Yeah, which is any future meeting topics. Let's see. And do we have, I'm trying to remember now, so I don't have it. I don't think we have topics for September yet, right? Katie and
Yeah.
other than moving the we'll probably move the civil rights discussion to September.
Yeah, I was just going to say that if, and then the other thing just to consider would be when you may want to talk about the budget. So I would just throw those out for consideration.
Yeah, so we'll I think Katie said earlier the mayor's budget, the mayor's proposed budget will come out tomorrow, and then kind of in the coming weeks and months will be when the council goes through its process of adopting or marking up and doing public hearings. Last year in this committee, we had a brief discussion at our September meeting. In September, we made a plan for how we wanted to comment on the budget. And then it was at our October meeting last year when we really dug in, and Rose Tang put together a number of potential positions we could take on housing related things in the budget. And we voted on those independently of what we wanted to do. That's how we did it last year for the budget. We can do that again, or we can do it differently. So that's the budget. And then the other thing that has been brought up is a conversation about people experiencing unsheltered homelessness in the city of Minneapolis. Lisa, who I don't think is here today, but offered to give this committee some grounding information about specifically from the youth perspective of youth experiencing homelessness right now. So that was another thing that has been risen up from you all that I think we would love to get on the calendar when it makes sense. So just knowing that things that have been brought up before, we are keeping note of and trying to figure out. So yeah, but if other people have other things they really want to make sure we find time for in the next, couple of months, now is a good time to talk about that.
I'll just add that when it does make sense to have Lisa do that it could be a nice addition to have to look at our MPS data around students experiencing homelessness and sort of who right now qualifies for housing support through our coordinated entry system and who doesn't, and some changes that we've seen recently given lower family shelter numbers and higher doubled up in motel numbers than we've historically seen. So when it makes sense, I would love to partner with Lisa and add that context as well.
That'd be great. I think it'd be really good to hear that's the connection with education and students. I like that.
Charlotte, I'd love to hear you give an update on where we are with stable homes also, just so people know the direction and just, the sheer need for additional funding and additional units that we need to, make available, right? So, and then hopefully we can pass something on to council to do some things to, put something behind it, right? To make sure it happens.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
If there's time in that same meeting, it might be nice to just round out that conversation with somebody that can speak to single adult homelessness. I know there's been some changes with shelters and, shelters staying 24/7 after, well, not after COVID, we're not after COVID, but as we move forward, just to round that out, if we have somebody from, that can speak to youth homelessness and family homelessness, adding somebody to speak to single adult homelessness would be nice, if there's time.
Like one Annie Wells, perhaps.
Or, I could help that, but somebody from the county might be able to speak in a more global way.
Yeah, we've had David Hewitt before. Another person from the county who could also speak to that is Danielle Werder, who recently became a manager at the Office to End Homelessness and works with all the single adult shelters. So
yeah, she would be good.
And then I would we talked about this earlier, but it's likely that there will want to have an opportunity to purchase policy discussion before the end of the year in this committee. That'll be somewhat dependent on, I don't think, it will not be in September, but potentially could be October or November.
I think that gives us a pretty good list for our remaining 4 sessions of the year, huh? Plus whatever else emerges. Okay. Well, I think we get 30 minutes back on our Thursday afternoon, which is like the first time ever. I feel like the last year it's been these jam-packed agendas where we've been going right up to game time. So it's like a nice little summer August surprise. All right.
I'm glad we did that on such a nice weather day.
Yeah, it is pretty nice up there, and not smoky. So that's
Right.
Right. All right. Well, I think that I'm going to use all the powers vested in me to declare this meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care.
Bye.
Thanks all.